Are you thinking of moving to Japan to study Japanese? I currently have a few students looking to start their language school journeys in Japan, and I was surprised to find that they were actually asking me the right questions and that their time digging through Reddit had basically led them to the conclusion that many students had the same experience that I had, so let's get into it. In this video, I'm going to share my experience and advice for helping you pick a school, what to ignore in the advertising and what to prioritize. I won't be naming any language school names in a negative way. I don't want to be sued. I don't know what the rules are with that, but it's not happening. I will be talking about some positively, particularly my university, as I had a fantastic experience with my university. I'll also share classmates' opinions, and I've also researched into other students' experiences. I'll share what learners actually say, the good, the bad, and about intensive 5-day programs versus lighter schedules, mixed level classes, and how language schools stack up against self-studying or university courses. Let's get straight into this. One of the big pluses of language schools is the immersion and structured practice, in theory. In a school, you're forced to speak Japanese daily. This can be a massive pro or a massive con, so let me explain. This method works fantastic for learning everyday words and phrases. For example, a teacher constantly saying to you, "Kite kudasai," instead of "please listen." That will eventually be ingrained in your head. Even just hearing sentences and grammar being used correctly for hours a day is really helpful. However, it's also really intensive, and it just kind of makes my brain hurt after a while of being in a learning environment constantly and constantly having things going in. It's a lot. So actually, in my opinion, this is not the best method. If I'm a beginner and I don't know 90% of the sentence the teacher is saying, and there's no visual clues, I just don't know what they're saying. I have no clue. So you're stuck in a place of, oh, I learned how to say a few things through repetition, but I also miss 60% of that class because I have no clue what is being said. Actually though, a really funny example of this is when I was studying in Korea, my teacher would always say, "Pachimi isoyo opsoyo," and she said it so much, I actually started dreaming about it. I remember I woke up one day and I was like, her saying that was literally in my dream, and I was like, I've spent way too much time in this classroom. So ideally, the teacher will know what level you're at and use language that matches that, but they don't always do that. My personal opinion is actually I prefer someone who can explain the grammar in my language and kind of link it to something in my language, if that is possible. It's not always possible, but that's just what I like. I know it's not for everyone, but I generally find I would say 50% of people do prefer this method, maybe even more. And then I don't know, maybe the other 50% are kind of nah, just talk to me. It will absorb eventually. I'm not that person. I need it explained. I want to know what I'm using and that I'm using it right. Anyway, schools often come with extra support too. Many programs help foreign students with practical issues such as helping you get the visa, finding a place to live, and etc. The help will also often be in English or your native language, which is great. Most schools also provide a cultural experience, which is fun. My school took us to Shinjuku Gyoen, which is a little park in Shinjuku, and that was actually really nice. I probably wouldn't have gone there if they hadn't taken us there. And no, it was genuinely really, really cute, really nice. They paid for it, so it was all free to let us in. And it was a really nice time. It was very nice going around with my classmates. We had fun. I think most of us were kind of also we actually don't want to be but it was kind of a fun we don't want. I enjoyed it. I actually might have been the only one there that was I'm loving this. I think everyone else there might have been why are we here? Okay, language schools are also valued for routine and resources. Classes are on a fixed schedule and follow a curriculum with textbooks, so you can't easily skip lessons. This is actually a massive pro because if you do miss a day, you can self-study and you have a book explaining everything you did in class if you need to study more when you get home. Classes are still useful here. It's kind of extra immersion. That's how I've always seen the classes. This is especially important in terms of speaking practice, the area that most students find they struggle with. If I were looking for one thing when it comes to finding a language school now, it wouldn't be the biggest or most popular, it would be the small class size and speaking practice focus. Honestly, you can do most of the other things at home, but you can't speak, you can speak to yourself at home, but Anyway, if you're the type of person who might slack off on solo study, having a teacher and homework can keep you on track. Group classes also mean instant practice partners, and you meet fellow learners and often make friends. As someone on Reddit put it, language school courses are face-to-face, in groups with a solid curriculum and placement tests to match your level. This can speed up your progress. Many report reaching JLPT M4 after a few months in Japan. Something harder to guarantee is studying solo. Let's also go off on a tangent here. Do you need a JLPT to apply to a language school? I have a lot of students who want to get a JLPT before going to a language school so they can show the language school that they know a bit of Japanese. The language school will give you their own tests, so don't worry about spending the extra time and money on getting a JLPT. However, if your visa allows you and you want to work in Japan whilst you're over there, then a JLPT could be a good thing because it could help you get the job. Though honestly, a JLPT M5 might not actually do much for you. Even an M4, it's not the best thing. They want to see kind of more of a native level. They want to see N2. I would say maybe an N4 and N3 is better than having no proof that you know the language. But they're probably not going to hire you over someone native unless you have amazing skills, if all you have is the M5 or N4, unfortunately. Not that the M5 or M4 aren't great achievements, it's just usually they're looking for someone who they can speak with on a native level. Okay, back to the main focus. Even attending from zero, a Japanese language school usually covers each level in maybe 3 to 6 months, which is actually a really fast pace, unless you are some kind of language genius, in which case, maybe not. So actually for me, it's a bit too fast and I look for a slower paced one if possible. For me, studying abroad is much more about enjoying my experience as improving my language ability. If I'm going to be locked in my room or in a library studying all day, I might as well be studying at home, is how I see it. So something you really need to think about is pacing. Are you in the country to learn as fast as possible? Do you have a goal where you need to know everything within a year or something like that? Then yeah, go for the 5-day one if you can take that. If not, and there's not really I need to be fluent by blah 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 time, I would go for a slower pace personally. On the flip side, language schools have a real downside. A major one is cost. Nearly every student warns they're expensive. One Redditor bluntly put it, the biggest drawback is that they are expensive. So as I just said, you need money to burn for it to be fully beneficial. Many students mention paying thousands of dollars per quarter. Having said that, I actually think they work out cheaper than doing lessons in my own country. For the pacing and hours per day, mine worked out actually about £5 per hour. Though, of course, on the flip side, you don't pick how many hours you're there for. So you're there for the full 4 hours a day. If you're on the 5 days a week one, if you're on the visa one. So you're paying I think it works out at about £20, £25 per day, depending on the school. I think at my local college, I paid about £120 or £140 for 10 1-hour lessons, or maybe 2 hours, I don't know. So Japan worked out cheaper for me. However, housing and food and transport also needs to be factored in. I'll be talking about universities in a bit and how these could actually be cost effective depending on how you do them. Classes can also be mixed ability kind of to a point or monolingual. A lot of the larger schools have many Chinese students who already know a lot of the kanji, or just students from Asian countries that use kanji, so other students may have trouble keeping up. Obviously, you'll have some people that are only just meeting the requirements for the level and people who are just below the requirements for the next level. There are also some students who are just there for the visa, who choose easier classes so they don't have to do anything. There was one kid in my lower intermediate class who had been living in Japan since high school and just slept in the class if he even showed up. He was just there for the visa, so yeah. He already knew Japanese quite well, and he chose an easier level. In other words, your classmates' backgrounds vary wildly. One person noted that in a larger class, some students are just bored while others struggle, making it hard for teachers to match everyone. Large class sizes at popular schools mean less personal attention. Is another common complaint. My teacher actually used to just get the Chinese students to come up and show us how to write the kanji correctly, but I also remember one of the girls was commenting, oh, you can tell the people who didn't learn kanji from a young age. I'm just leave me alone. I'm doing my best. So a lot of the schools will kind of advertise, hey, we're really inclusive, we have students from all backgrounds. And actually, this is my biggest issue with schools. And it's that students often don't have a common language within the classroom. So even as a post-beginner in Japanese, most people won't be able to have a deep conversation or like a meaning conversation with classmates that would lead to a friendship. So this can lead to massive class divides or just kind of like unfriendly classrooms where no one really talks much. My class in language school was really lucky in that everyone spoke either English, Mandarin, or both. We all generally got along and could find a way to communicate with everyone. But outside of class, there was a massive divide in like who you hung around with depending on language, which is completely fair. You've spent like 4 hours in a building not speaking in your native language, like your brain has to do some work. Outside of the class, you kind of just want to like chill, like have easy talking sessions. So this happens quite a lot, but my class was lucky. The people that have been in the school since beginners actually said this was really rare and this is the first time they'd been in a class like this, and sometimes they'd basically been the only English speaker in the class. And if you're a beginner and nobody in your class can speak or is confident speaking your language, and all you can say is, I will go to the supermarket and buy eggs because I am hungry, you're not going to be making friends in class. So be prepared, unless your classmates are super eager to try and like get over that language gap. Another thing I'd add to my checklist personally is, if possible, find a school that teaches in your language. So as I just said, not a school that's like, we want a diverse classroom, because that means that they want as much money as possible and it's not tailored to the individual needs. This is obviously nothing against diversity in a classroom. It's against schools just trying to make as much money from you as possible by shoving you all into the same classroom and teaching in a way that doesn't actually suit the people in the classroom. When teaching isn't in a particular language, so like if it's not aimed at English or Mandarin or whatever, whoever you're teaching, it can be a mess. So for example, our teacher used to show us pictures instead of translations for words. So what I would have liked, or what I had in some previous language schools in Korea, is it would be the word we're learning and then the English translation. And actually it'd have like Vietnamese, Chinese, it would just have like tons of the biggest languages, so that you're likely to hit like a language that the reader can understand. But yeah, they would show us pictures instead of the translations. It would just have the word in Japanese and a picture. After class, my friends and I realized we all thought some of the pictures meant different things. So one of the pictures was a horse with a carriage, kind of like a horse box. I thought that the word meant horse and carriage, and someone else thought it was just the horse box, the horse carriage, not a horse and the carriage, and someone else thought it was horse riding. So like it can be a mess. Like you might misunderstand, everyone's understanding what's happening differently because they're not being explained what is happening. They're just seeing a picture and they're all processing it differently. You kind of have to go home and study it again. Or like in class, I would be there on my phone, like trying to translate the class, which is ridiculous. The absolute worst one for me was a university textbook, actually. This isn't in Japan, it was in Seoul. That was all in Korean and it didn't even have pictures. You just had to Google all the words on the word list yourself to get the translations. And it was such a waste of time. Like in that time, I could have been sat there trying to learn the words, writing it down a million times. But instead I was there on Google, like making sure I spelled it right, making sure it looked like the right word and everything. So what I'm saying is, in class where they only have explanations in Japanese, you then go home, or in classes where they only have explanations in Japanese, you then have to go home and Google it all, and it feels like a waste of time going in, except for like the priceless immersion that is genuine. I'm not even joking right now. I kind of said that in a jokey way, but it's such a good point. So another con is results really vary. This like obviously will happen anyway. You could have the best school ever, the results will vary. But there's a lot of students online that are basically just like, they feel like they only learn basic conversation, even after months. For example, after a 4-month course, 320 hours, one student said, you can learn basic conversation in that time, but not much else. Some even said they've learned more studying at home. One learner confessed they probably would have made faster progress self-studying. In fact, a harsh Reddit commenter claimed most language schools are scams. Most students can't pass N2 in 2 years. I kind of agree with that. You have to be like a studier. You have to be the one that's there. Like, I can study 4, 6, 7 hours a day for 2 years, like no breaks. If you can do that, then yeah, you can probably pass N2 in the 2 years. If not, it's probably not realistic. I would personally burn out like probably after like 2 or 3 terms. So I just wasn't made for that. Actually, a problem in my class is we all wanted more speaking in our class because we actually could do everything else at home if we wanted to. Maybe not just speaking, but we wanted more speaking. So to me, kanji and wordless in class time was the biggest waste of time. But maybe that's just because the way they taught it, where I'd literally have to look up the kanji in real time to make sure I understood it. I'd actually sometimes just skip kanji days and self-study at home, but my visa wasn't dependent on the school. I felt like I could do it in half the time on my own. I actually had a day once where I guess like it's hard to explain, but the train I got didn't take me to the right part of Shinjuku station. It usually takes me to a different part, and I had to change trains. And I got so lost in Shinjuku station because I was just in a different part that I didn't know. I realized I was going to be late for class and they were going to mark me as absent. Even if I was allowed to show up after, but I would get marked as absent. And it was a kanji day. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to a cafe to study. This is not worth it. And it took me so long to get out of Shinjuku station that day. A unique angle is the visa factor. To stay in Japan on a student visa, you must attend a recognized school and usually meet a minimum course load, 20 hours a week. This ties many travelers' visas to their school, and this can be quite serious. So sometimes they'll be like, oh, you didn't attend enough, we're getting rid of you, like we're cutting your visa. Unfortunately, I mean, actually I say sometimes, I think they're usually like that. Unfortunately, a side effect is that some people sign up mainly for the visa, not the learning. One Redditor casually admitted classmates lied about their skills in placement tests in order to get a student visa so that they could work part-time. I actually mentioned this happened in my class. When some students aren't serious, it can drag down motivation in class. I actually agree with that, like seeing a student literally sleeping in class. He was really young, by the way, like I don't want to be like, him. But like it did kind of like make the class feel more like chill and less serious, which again, I kind of like. But I would be lying if I said that was a good thing as well, like for everyone. So even more troubling are media reports about visa misuse. The Japan Times ran a headline warning that schools were used as a front for importing cheap labor. One commenter detailed the grim picture. Students are required to work 28 hours a week at low-wage jobs, often provided by shady recruiters, paying the expenses for the school and lodging from their meager earnings. In other words, critics argue some language schools function less as classrooms and more as labor funnels. Whether this is true or not for most schools is debated, but it's a worrisome mention. This wasn't the case with any of my classmates, as far as I'm aware. Everyone just seemed to be there, like, of their own choice, you know. However, I did hear a story of one girl who basically got scammed. So everything did happen that she needed to happen. She got into the school. However, I think it was something like the accommodation. She went through like a third party and not directly with the school. And I think she needed to for her visa or something. I don't know. And the accommodation they promised her was not the accommodation she got. She got like really, really shady accommodation or something like that. So that is something to just be aware of. Make sure that the people you are going with is reputable. If I'm not mistaken, they took a lot of her money as well. So I don't know the full story, but I heard that was a thing that happened whilst I was there. And I think like without evidence, and maybe even with evidence, the school isn't very likely to do anything like, oh, I use this person to like sort out my accommodation here and they've like been really scammy and they also like bring other people to your school. Can you stop using them? I don't know that they will, mainly because that's a bit of hearsay. Like obviously you might be able to provide the proof, but it's still a bit of hearsay, kind of like, oh yeah, they did do, it kind of sounds more like a dispute kind of thing. So just be aware. So another kind of story, one of my friends who moved up from level 1 said her first week was like really strange. So she got put in the wrong level. I actually don't know why, because it was like really the wrong level. Because we were in intermediate and she ended up in level 1, like absolute beginners. And basically her first week, her first teacher came in, because we had different teachers every day, and they did hiragana a to o, so like the first row of the alphabet. And I think she said something like they had a PowerPoint. So she was like, yeah, we're learning it with PowerPoints. And then the next day, a teacher came in and they had worksheets, not a worksheet and a PowerPoint. So she was like, oh, cool, we have worksheets as well. And then on the third day, there wasn't a PowerPoint and like the worksheets were different. Or like it was something like there wasn't even like the worksheets or something, or the worksheets had all changed. And it just kind of went to show that all the teachers are not communicate. They're told you're teaching this and then they make their own stuff, which I actually don't like at all. It wasn't organized. There should have been a curriculum for all teachers in terms of PowerPoints and papers. And then there's room for them to show their own flair or personalization elsewhere. That's also easier on the teachers. Like, it means that they don't have to like make as much work for themselves if they just have to follow the curriculum and they know that they're teaching the right thing. Anyway, let's start talking about how intensive should your school be for you. This is a huge consideration. In Japan, intensive usually means like really intensive. Full-time classes 5 days a week, often mornings plus heavy homework. For example, one learner noted that a common schedule is 20 to 24 hours of class per week, Monday to Friday. It's a bit much if you want free time. I think mine was 20 hours a week, and you have like a 10-minute break, and we could actually go down to the shop, get some like snacks and so on. Another explained bluntly, intensive means 5 days a week of classes plus the same amount of homework, and that is completely true. There is a lot of homework. If you want to keep up with the classes, you need to revise it after, and then you have homework on top of that. So yes, doing an intensive course in Tokyo is like having a full-time job in Japanese. Having said that, like, you do still have a bit of free time. Like, some of my classmates had part-time jobs, so they had time, obviously. The appeal of lighter schedule is obvious. Free time to explore Japan, fewer class days mean more weekends or afternoons for cultural experiences, trips, or even work. Several learners praise part-time courses abroad for exactly that reason. However, remember the visa requirement. You would generally need around 20 hours a week of study to qualify. And pretty much all the schools put these 20 hours a week over multiple days. You can't just have like 3 days of 7 hours or something. They're usually 3 hours a week, 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, or 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, in fact. Some readers found that if you dip below the full time, you might need a different visa, true, like a long stay sightseeing visa, so to legally remain. Basically, this is the where you're born lottery. A lot of countries can get a 90-day free visa. I am luckily one of those countries. I am not a country, but I am from one of those countries. If you have the choice, this is like a clear option to me. You have time to go home, revise what you've done, and enjoy your life in Japan. I'd actually say it was common by the end of my term in Japan for students to just take a few days off a week, or like a day off a week. If this is likely to be you, pay for 3 to 4 days a week, don't pay for 5 days a week. However, if you're looking to stay long term, if you're looking to stay a year, 2 years, you can't do this. You can do this 6 months, I think, maximum. So yeah. Another thing I did as the exam certificate actually didn't mean much to me, it was more the language experience, is I only booked 7 out of 8 of the weeks, and I didn't book/pay for the exam week. Instead, I went traveling. To me, it doesn't really matter if I have a piece of paper that says you passed the exams at this language school. It really was just about my personal language improvement. But in short, if you sign up to a typical language school in Tokyo, expect 5 days a week of study. If you really want a 3 to 4 day schedule, you'll need to seek special programs, often at smaller schools, or consider alternative visa routes. It's a trade-off though. Intense study can boost your Japanese fast, but part-time lets you actually enjoy life in Japan. It's also like a luxury, like I mentioned a minute ago, to get the Japanese 90-day visa. You may also be able to look at doing a working holiday visa, but remember you can only get this under the age of 30. If you're from specific countries, and you can only get it once, so don't waste it on language school unless you want it for language school. And you also, I would double check that the language school lets you use the working holiday visa. They should do, because you're literally just going there. Like, you're just applying for the school. They don't need to sort out anything visa wise. And just in case I didn't mention it, the working holiday visa is usually for a year, and lets you work part-time whilst you're in Japan. This is going to be such a long video. Okay, language school isn't the only path. Many forums compare it to self-studying or online learning. For serious self-learners, studying on their own can avoid the cost and rigid schedule of a school. One student confessed that eventually self-study worked better for them. I found that self-studying helped me a lot better than classes, they said, because it forced active thinking and problem solving. Others note that online platforms like italki offer flexibility. You can schedule lessons on your timetable and pick tutors to fit your needs and budget. In fact, a top commenter said italki gives you the most bang for your buck. Practice with and learn from multiple people without a long commute. I'm going to put my little italki code in the video somewhere. Just a note, I actually have used italki. I used it years ago to study for exams. Okay, what about university programs? Some people consider taking Japanese at university for an exchange year or a degree. Forums overwhelmingly say a dedicated language school is usually faster and more intensive. True. One commentator cautioned that college Japanese majors take longer and cost more, but graduates are often worse at Japanese. True, in my opinion. Than language school students. In general, university classes are far less immersive and you mix Japanese study with other subjects. That actually depends on the university. Like in Europe, I think it's very common to not have a minor, but whatever. And also in Europe, in a lot of places in Europe, your university would actually be free or very low cost. So another point. If you are based in Europe and specifically in the EU or any country that gets free university, in Sweden I would recommend Dalarna University. They have a Japanese course. If you're like part of the EU, you can take that for free and it's online. So I actually did my Japanese course through them, and then I did an exchange in Japan through them at Kansai Gaidai. And I went completely for free on that exchange, and oh my gosh, Kansai Gaidai University was great. The pacing for me was great. I think it was like 6 hours a week of classes, and then obviously, there was more classes. I'm thinking of just Japanese because I did kanji, and it would have been more like 12 hours probably. I can't remember how long their classes were. But I did Japanese and I did kanji, and I just absolutely loved it. I thought the pacing was great. The people who said you don't learn as much at university as you do at a language school are completely right, because you don't do as many classes at university and the pacing is much slower. I actually preferred the university pacing personally, but I don't know that I could confidently recommend to people that they should take Japanese as a major. Anyway, more importantly, studying abroad on an exchange year abroad, you do not need to take Japanese as your major to do that. A lot of universities offer exchange programs, and a lot of universities offer exchange programs in Japan where it doesn't matter 100% what your major is. They might be able to fit it in that you can go to Japan. Usually, if your university has an agreement with a university in Japan, you pay the same amount that you pay to your home university to go to Japan. So you are not paying extra. You then have to pay for your housing in Japan, and I'm assuming you would have had to have paid for it for your home university. So you are not paying extra. All you are paying extra is the flights and maybe insurance. I think this is the best time you can go and study in Japan. Ideally at a university that makes you do a language course, I guess, if that is what you're wanting to do. But if the main thing is I want to study in Japan and pick up a bit, this is your time to do it. This is the best time to do it pricing wise. I think, and I might be missing something, you're not paying a lot more than you would be paying your home university. You're paying for the flights and probably, to be honest, there probably is a lot of other little things. And you're obviously paying for the experience to be there, you're paying for food and so on, and you probably can't work whilst you're there. So that is a little note. So if you had a job that was funding your university in country, that would be a problem. There are sometimes options for scholarships, so I would look into that, but this is something I recommend a million times. Finally, don't overlook free or cheaper options. For example, some Japanese cities offer free or low-cost classes at local ward offices, which seasoned learners in Japan have recommended. One student pointed out that these free lessons at the local kyakusho, me like, wait, what am I reading? Changing languages, can be surprisingly solid, supplementing schools with apps, exchange meetups, or even part-time jobs like working in a restaurant with Japanese staff can also accelerate learning at minimal cost. My actual goal next time is to study at language exchange once a week and do a 3 to 4 day class, not a 5-day intensive one. Okay, right, if anyone is actually still listening, let's summarize. Pros of a Japanese language school: you get total immersion, a fixed daily routine in Japanese, and built-in practice partners. Good schools offer small classes, skilled teachers, conversation events, and even visa/housing support. Many students appreciate the accountability. It pushes you to learn. This is literally why I do it, accountability. It does force me to go in and learn, as opposed to studying online. Intensive courses can really jumpstart your speaking and keep you on track to take a JLPT exam. Cons: it can be very intense and pricey. 5 days a week of classes plus homework is a full-time commitment, which leaves little room for sightseeing or part-time work. Classes are often mixed level or monolingual, so not everyone advances smoothly. Some students find they learn only the basics in school and later need to study self-study anyway. There are also real concerns about visa abuse. Stories of students being funneled into a 28-hour work weeks for little pay are unsettling. Finally, a language school requires commitment and money. One learner warns it's only worth it if you're motivated, disciplined, and not on a shoestring budget. I actually agree with that. You need to be motivated and disciplined, or you are wasting money. If your goal is quick, immersive Japanese learning and you can afford it, a good language school in Japan can be a fantastic experience, but go in with eyes open. You'll be studying hard most days and classroom quality varies. Talk to alumni, read reviews on Reddit, Gogo Nihon, for example, and weigh how intensive you want your schedule to be. For those who prefer a lighter pace or have less money, alternatives might suit. Schedule tutors on italki, follow a self-study plan, or enroll in a local community class. University programs are an option too. They're typically slower than pure language schools. I hope this was interesting and informative, and if you're watching this to actually go to a university or a language school in Japan, please let me know below, just what you thought of this video. If you found anything different, if you've actually been to Japan on language school, was your experience the same or was it completely different? If you went to a good language school in Japan, please leave it in the comments. Let us all know, where did you go, how was your experience? If you went to a bad one, it's up to you. You can leave that in the comments as well, warn people against it. And thank you all very, very much for watching. I will see you next time.